Rather than deny that collusion took place, he now today argued that collusion isn't illegal. Let's watch.
I've been sitting here looking in the federal code trying to find collusion as a crime.
It's not.
Collusion is not a crime. I'm not even know if that's a crime, colluding about Russians.
Okay.
You start analyzing the crime. The hacking is the crime. The hacking is the crime.
That certainly is the original
Well, the
crime.
president didn't hack.
Of course not. That's the original
He didn't pay them for hacking.
Oh, it's so much fun. An apparent shift in strategy. Giuliani now appears to be saying the collusion is not so bad after all. You saw him there chuckling about it. It also seemed to undermine the credibility, however, President Trump's frequent and categorical denials that there was no collusion, which has been a familiar refrain from this president. Let's watch him.
Let's put it this way. There is absolutely no collusion. That has been proven.
Look, there's been no collusion.
Zero collusion.
There's no collusion. No collusion.
No collusion. No collusion. Just so you understand, there's been no collusion. There's been no crime.
There was absolutely no collusion. Everybody knows it. No collusion, no nothing. No collusion.
And I say it all the time. There was no collusion.
So what just happened? In an attempt to clean up his remarks, Giuliani went on Fox News to say he was merely making a lawyer's argument. Let's watch this.
So when I said today that there was no collusion and therefore, and that collusion also is no crime, I've been saying that from the very beginning. So did John Dowd. It's a very, very familiar lawyer's argument that the alternative. My client didn't do it, and even if he did it, it's not a crime. And I have said that over and over again. Collusion is not a crime. The only crime here is hacking, and it is ridiculous to think that the president hacked.
Well, see if you can follow that. Giuliani's argument, however, is a matter of semantics. Whatever word you use to describe it, if the president or others work to advance Russia's criminal cyber attack on the United States, they could be considered co-conspirators as agents of the Kremlin. And conspiracy, by the way, Mr. President, and your lawyer, is a crime. Separately, in a bizarre twist, Giuliani also broke some news today. He said he heard from 3 reporters that Michael Cohen is alleging that top-level campaign staff met to discuss Russian help before the infamous meeting at Trump Tower. Before 2 meetings. Yet at the same time, Giuliani revealed the news of an alleged second meeting. He simultaneously denied that it ever took place.
There wasn't another meeting that has been leaked but hasn't been public yet.
Okay.
That was a meeting, an alleged meeting, 3 days before. According to Cohen, he says there was a meeting with Donald Jr., with Jared Kushner, with Paul Manafort, with Gates, possibly 2 others, in which they, out of the presence of the president, discussed the meeting with the Russians. We checked with their lawyers, the ones we could check with, which were 4 of the 6. That meeting never, ever took place. It didn't happen. It's a figment of his imagination or his lying.
Well, joining me right now is Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour, Robert Costa, national political reporter for the Washington Post, and Bret Stephens, columnist for the New York Times. Thank you for all of you. What just happened, Senator? Why did they go from they didn't collude with the Russians, they didn't participate in this conspiracy to disrupt and discredit our electoral process. They didn't do, oh, no, if they did it, it's no problem. What happened? Is it the accumulation of this Michael Cohen story that's getting out that they're going to be caught, so they might as well deny the guilt of the crime because they can't deny the crime?
Hard to know what they're doing because, from all appearances, Rudy Giuliani is implicating his client in a web of criminality. By the way, it's more than just semantics. This country was attacked, as you saw from the indictment of 12 Russian operatives and spies who were ordered by President Putin to do this.
Well, they've been
attack.
Indicted for felonies, and this president has helped them do it. Or at least they're now saying, well, we don't deny that we did it.
And, you know, the definition of conspiracy, and I've given this instruction to a jury, so have judges, is that there are spokes on a wheel. You don't have to be at the center. All you need to do is be one of those spokes. You don't need to know all of the conspiracy or agree to all of it or even know all of it, but you can be part of it if you just participate in some of it. That's what Rudy Giuliani is saying Donald Trump did. And we're talking about fundamentally an attack on America that Rudy Giuliani seems very dismissive about taking seriously. And the only interpretation, the only strategy I can see is that he's trying to strengthen the base, reassure them, and make light of it.
What he seems to be saying is, Yeah, we may have agreed to talk turkey. We may have agreed to talk dirt on Hillary. We may have been helping them generally, but we didn't have anything to do with the hacking. What kind of defense is that?
That is a very slim to none defense. That is the kind of defense that would be laughed out of a courtroom.
Yeah.
And I just would add one more point. All of this talk about a second meeting is truly damning, because if you take Donald Trump Jr.'s testimony before the Judiciary Committee, essentially this contradicts him. It could lead him to be in danger of perjury, and clearly he has failed to be truthful.
Let's go back to, there's two news stories here. One is this second meeting, which would only add to the deliberative quality of the meeting in the second place. Let's talk about whether you should meet with the Russians to get some dirt. Oh, let's do it. That seems more deliberative. Let me go to this other question. Why is Rudy shifting from, we didn't do it, but if we did it, so what?
Because Rudy Giuliani is
we didn't meet to collude, but if we did, so what?
Rudy Giuliani is running a shifting offensive against Robert Mueller.
Shifty as well.
Shifting, because he wants to get out in front of whatever Robert Mueller has to say about the president. He wants to make sure that when the report comes out, that everyone doesn't just read the report, that they look at Robert Mueller and his team and say, well, those are those angry people who never liked the president. And now he's saying, well, even if we did do this crime, we really shouldn't or do this thing that you say is a crime. It's actually not something that's happening. I think he's shifting because he's maybe worried about this, maybe worried about whether or not there might be some sort of evidence against the president. But really, it's about the fact that he wants to be out on the media yelling at people and making sure that the Trump campaign is out front on this and attacking people, because he's worried that the president might get attacked later on.
Well, let me ask you, Robert, as a journalist, it seems to me there's two ways to look at Rudy. Either he's doing preventive war here. Look, we're going to get worse news like this, that there was a meeting, that they knew about it, there was an attempt to get dirt. It's all going to come out thanks to Michael Cohen. Or this idea of rolling disclosure, which is only admit what's already been put in evidence. So last week, we ended the week with news that Michael Cohen's going to put out the word that the president knew about the meeting at Trump Tower. So since that's probably going to happen, why don't we just say, yes, it did happen, and say, but that's not illegal?
Well, Giuliani's
rolling disclosure, preventive war. What is it?
More preventive war, based on my reporting. Giuliani is reacting to the news, but he's also being defiant, denying these kinds of meetings happen, while also leaving room in a lot of his answers for different things to come along the way in the course of this legal and political story. And so you see Giuliani really out there on an island, legally and politically, with the president, trying to be defensive, trying to be the lead lawyer, going on all the shows as the spokesman. But even Giuliani, who has access to some of the evidence, he only knows so much about what's going to come.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.